This is probably one of the hardest videos I've ever had to make. I think mostly I feel really embarrassed with how everything played out, but I want to be really honest with you guys. That's sort of what I've prided myself on my channel, is being able to be open and honest about my experiences and how I'm feeling. And that's what I tried to do on my latest live stream, about my queer journey from shame to radical self-love. There was a bit on that live stream where I was talking about my gender identity fairly early on in the beginning. I'll play a clip of that here. It's all like a little confusing to me when I think about it. I think it's more of just letting people tell you who they are rather than attaching labels to them yourself. I usually just prefer the label genderqueer. I'm not, which is kind of falls into the category of non-binary, at least for me. I usually use genderqueer, but non-binary, it's kind of, for me, it's a little interchangeable. So I don't personally, and this is a personal thing, and when I say this, I want to be clear that I am not saying that anyone else who identifies like this is wrong for doing so. It's just very personal in my mind. I don't personally feel comfortable using the word trans for me. I guess in my mind, the reason I don't is because I don't feel like when I came to terms with and I questioned my gender identity, I don't feel like I transitioned into anything, even socially. I feel like I still present myself in the same way that I did before or however I want to. I don't feel like I'm doing anything different to change myself, I guess, and how I express myself. It's more just about a personal identity for me. And I don't know, maybe it's some internalized fear or shame, but I guess that's why I don't really feel comfortable using the term trans. I'm not bothered if somebody else wants to say that's what that is. I don't know. It's hard because I think within the trans community especially, a lot of people have sort of bonded over that label and the hardships and the difficulties that come with it, and specifically transitioning, whether it be socially or surgically. And they can get really triggered and invalidated when it feels like someone is using that label that shouldn't be using it, or they feel shouldn't be using it, if that makes sense. And because of that, it's hard to, I guess, have that conversation when you are non-binary or genderqueer and maybe you don't feel comfortable using the word trans, because I don't want to unintentionally invalidate anyone who does use the word trans and they are non-binary. Basically what happened, well, it happened during the live stream, but I didn't see the message until after. I had a long string of messages from an account on Instagram, somebody who was watching my content, and they felt really invalidated because the way I was describing transness as being the act of transitioning, which wasn't what I intended. I was just trying to explain where my mind was at and trying to poorly articulate why I didn't feel comfortable. And maybe I didn't articulate that correctly. But they accused me of further pathologizing transness and suffering from, eternalized transphobia and pushing a transphobic narrative because I wasn't comfortable calling myself trans. And they see what I was describing with my gender identity as being trans. And because of that, I had, I don't want to say because of that, because it does partly fall on me. Sorry, you're going to see my dog walking around in the background, but I know I can seem like I have it all together on my channel sometimes, and that I'm very self-aware of where my mindset is at and, grounding techniques and stuff. But I failed in this moment, and I had a really hard time emotionally regulating my emotions, and I got very worked up. And I felt very sad and concerned, and I didn't disagree with anything that this person was saying about what trans is. I completely understand that trans is being used as more of an umbrella term, especially in the LGBTQ community. Of course, it's not true for everyone, but as a whole, it seems like trans is meant to just be somebody who doesn't identify with the gender they were assigned at birth. And by that definition, non binary people would also be under the trans umbrella. But I think we have to be respectful of people who aren't comfortable using certain labels, and we certainly shouldn't be pushing people to use a label within their community that they're not comfortable with for whatever reason. We are all a product of heteronormative society, and even if part of those reasons might be some sort of internalized transphobia, I don't think we should be pushing people to have to use a label that they might just not be comfortable using. Labels are not for everyone in every single case. And I think this is a case for me where I sort of jumped the gun because I felt I had all these emotions and I had a lot of impulsivity, and I wanted to embrace the trans label because I didn't disagree with what they were saying. But the problem is if I was going to come out as saying that I'm okay being called trans and I am trans, it didn't happen under circumstances that felt that it should have been. Like, I shouldn't have been in that headspace when I did that, if I was going to do that. And I know the response to that has been overwhelmingly positive, but I still completely panicked. Like, it felt good for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then I had a full-blown panic attack, and I was completely just freaking out about it because it scared me for whatever reason. I don't know. There's just a lot of expectations and I think pressure undertaking that label. And I was, on one end, I'm scared that I'm looking like I'm trying to take space that doesn't belong to me. And then on the other end, I'm scared that I'm invalidating non-binary people who present like I do and have similar experiences to me, but use a trans label because I don't want to use a trans label. But the thing that we have to keep in mind here as well is if somebody else's experience and being honest about those experiences are invalidating, feels invalidating to your own identity, maybe that's something that you have to work out within yourself to feel confident within your own identity. Because the way I see it, I am 100% fully supportive of anyone, wherever they're at on the spectrum or under the trans umbrella, who wants to openly claim that identity. Because that's what it is. It's your identity. You are free to use it. And I 100% respect that. And I understand people's reasons for using it. I do. But I also feel like I have to be honest with myself. And if I don't feel comfortable using a label, then that should sort of be the end of discussion. Like, I just feel like that should be respected. And I'm really mad at myself and embarrassed that this is what sort of came of it. And I guess I kind of got ahead of myself here. So let me go back just a little bit. Basically what happened after I received that message, it was probably within, I don't know, maybe an hour, if even that, after I got the message. I don't know. I wasn't like keeping track of time when it happened. So after all that, I kind of panicked and I made a comment that I then posted to my YouTube tab, community tab, and then on Twitter. And I said, I'm doing some reflecting on some of the stuff I said here about not feeling comfortable saying I'm trans, even though I identify as genderqueer and overall pretty apathetic to the binary genders. After listening to this back, I'm thinking a lot of this is eternalized shame and fear of being invalidated. I'm still learning and growing and coming to terms with things. As I said, self-love is a never-ending journey, and this is another part of it. So hi, I'm Brina, and I am trans. Have a great day. That felt really good at the time until I sat with it and my emotions kind of came down, and then I didn't feel so good about it because I wasn't ready to do this if I ever wanted to do it. And something I will say about the person who sent that message, a lot of what I said in that comment was sort of a projection of what they relayed to me, of what I was doing, and that was really overwhelming to hear. And obviously I wasn't really thinking clearly, and that's on me. Okay, don't get me wrong. That is all on me. But I do think we have a problem in the queer community in terms of identities and labels where we think it's okay to just sort of assign a label to someone or tell someone that their identity isn't actually true or sort of project feelings of invalidation on someone else's experience. Looking back when I was more clear-headed and looking back at that stream, I feel like I was very clear in that I was confused and that I wasn't sure where I fit and that I wasn't projecting my experience on other people. I was just talking about what's going on in my head. And I think in order to have an honest conversation about these types of topics, we have to pull back on the tone policing a little bit and allow people to just be confused and to just be discovering themselves and to be growing and learning. We can't force that on people. And we certainly shouldn't be forcing labels on people because them not using a certain label makes us feel invalidated in our experience. You have to validate yourself and your experience. And yes, there are barriers to that given the society we live in, but we cannot be putting it on other queer people to validate our existence. We have to do that within ourselves. I was really hurt by this. And even though it was just one person's words can hurt a lot, especially when we're talking about really vulnerable topics such as this. And as a whole, I think to sort of prevent, I guess as a message to my audience, I think something to keep in mind, if you're going to be talking specifically about somebody else's identity, not talking about your experiences, which is what most people do in my comments. They relate their experiences to me, and that is totally fine. But when you are taking somebody else's experiences and sort of weaponizing that as being a bad thing, I just think that can be really harmful. And I do think that it would be good practice to sort of get consent to have those conversations. Like before you go on a huge monologue, because it can be really hard to like look at a comment and realize that it's not going to be good for your mental health and step away before you finish reading it. So when you have a comment that is like multiple paragraphs long, it's hard to pull back and not read that. And I really think it would be good before you do that to somebody to kind of get their consent if they're okay with you having this long monologue about their identity, where you're putting their identity sort of on a chopping block or weaponizing or tokenizing it in a way where it has to be this way, or criticizing them for not labeling themselves a certain way. Like that can be very overwhelming and triggering and harmful. And I just think it's good practice to maybe not do that or get consent before you do something like that. I'm not talking about getting consent before you leave long comments, but if you're leaving a comment that is specifically about an identity marker, like somebody's gender identity or their sexuality, or even like their mental health, those types of like invasive questions or analysis, I guess you could say, like almost like an amateur analysis of their identity based on what you saw in a video, that can be very triggering and overwhelming. And it's probably good practice to get consent before you just unload that on somebody. Especially if you're in a headspace where you're sort of having this expectation that they have to label themselves a certain way. Otherwise, it invalidates you, and that's this person's fault. That's really not fair. It really isn't. And I didn't really see it at the time until I was able to get to a clearer headspace and have some conversations with some close friends, thankfully, who were able to sort of calm me down. Because the aftermath, even though everything looked really fine on the outside, like online on social media, I really struggled after I did this, where I like took on the trans label. And I was panicking because now I felt like I shouldn't have done it, because it didn't feel like it was something that I was ready to do if I ever wanted to do it, if I even want that label in the first place. And then I was scared because there were a lot of people that I validated, and that's what I wanted. I did it because I wanted people to feel comfortable using the trans label if they have experiences similar to mine and they were scared to use it. I wanted to people to feel comfortable being themselves and using whatever label felt like it identified with their gender identity. But I sort of lost myself along the way, and I wasn't considering how I felt. And that my identity doesn't just exist to validate other people just because I'm online and I'm putting my face behind a camera. I will say that I fully acknowledge that being non-binary, which is a vast, like there's so many different experiences amongst, being non-binary. Like you can be non-binary and experience it in completely different ways. And my experience with my gender identity is more so that I don't care about it. I don't identify as a woman. I don't identify as a man. Some non-binary people, they might identify with more of one or the other, a mixture of both, different from day to day, etc. I don't identify with it really at all. I don't know what womanhood means to me. When I think of womanhood, I really only think of how I've been treated because of the gender I was assigned at birth, because of the way I am perceived, because of the way I present myself. But that's not womanhood. You know what I mean? Those are the things that I think about, how society has treated me because of this. But when it comes to what womanhood means to me, it doesn't really mean anything because I don't identify that way. I am very apathetic to gender as a whole. So that is my experience. But I know that there is a certain privilege with the experience I have because I sort of push back on this idea that I have to appear androgynous just because I'm non-binary. I don't want to feel like I have to look non-binary in order to be non-binary. I really want to push back against that. Like, it's okay that I'm still perceived as a woman. I've accepted that that's the case. As long as people accept that when I correct them, that's not how I identify, and that's okay too. I just kind of go through the world wanting to express myself however I feel like. And if that looks feminine or looks more masculine at some days, I don't care. I really don't. And if that is similar to your experience, or you have more to say like about that experience, maybe you have some similarities and some differences and you want to share, you're totally welcome to do that. If you have your reasons for identifying as trans as a non-binary person, please share them. If you have your reasons for not identifying as trans as a non-binary person, also please share them. So to the people that were under, that post that I made, sharing their experiences and sharing how they felt very empowered to see someone else using a label that maybe they are scared to use, please do not let this discourage you from finding comfort in that label. I'm going to definitely link some resources and blogs below of different perspectives of other non-binary people. And hopefully maybe that helps you find some sort of validation in your experience, because it is 100% okay to call yourself trans and have that experience. And I don't want to get on here in front of a camera and like necessarily take it back. That's where the serious embarrassment comes in, because I just feel so stupid for doing this. But it's a lot of pressure, and it's a space that I don't know if it's a space that I want to be in right now. I don't identify as cis, but something doesn't feel right about calling myself trans either. And I don't have like an explanation for that that's going to be perfect. And it's entirely possible that maybe some of it is some sort of internalized transphobia, as, the person that messaged me said it was. But that is my journey and that is my experience, and I have to remain in control of it. And I can't just fit somebody. I don't exist as a queer person to try to push, to try to get outside of the box of heteronormative society, only to be placed in a different box by the queer community. Like, we have to be more open with allowing people to have their experiences, especially when they're not using those experiences to be weaponized against other people and say, well, this experience isn't valid because I didn't experience it that way. That is completely wrong and harmful, and I 100% am behind calling people like that out. But I don't think this was a case where that was happening. Just because I am not comfortable using a certain label does not mean that you should feel invalidated in using that label if you've had a similar experience to mine. That is absolutely not what I'm saying. I just want to be able to have my own space, to have my own journey, and come to my own conclusions in my own time. And at the time that this happened and that post was made, I don't feel like I had that space. And I sort of feel like my agency was sort of taken away. And a big chunk of that is my own fault. I was in a bad headspace, and I made an impulsive decision that I just wasn't ready for. And And I'm just trying to sort of, I guess, own up to that, because I don't, it's going to be such a huge stress and anxiety on me. And I don't know why, like, I don't know why it upset me so much, because again, everybody's responses have been pretty great and welcoming, but I feel wrong about it. And I can't explain what it is. I just, that's where I'm at. That's where my headspace is. And I want to be honest with you guys about what I'm feeling. I certainly don't want to feel like I'm being forced into a space that maybe I'm not comfortable being in yet or ever. And I want to be honest about where I am comfortable. And right now I'm comfortable in the non-binary umbrella as a genderqueer person. Those are labels that I'm comfortable with using. And if that means I could possibly fit into another label to you, if that means that I could be trans, that's totally okay. It's not going to bother me to hear other people perceive me that way. I'm probably not going to use that label for myself until or if I'm ever in a space where, I feel like that is where I am completely comfortable in publicly declaring that as being a label for me. And again, I am so sorry for the people that I may have let down because they really were happy that I was able to use that label. Like, I'm genuinely so sorry, and I really hope that if that is how you identify, you do not use this as a reason to feel invalidated for not wanting to call yourself trans. Like, please don't do that, please. That is so the opposite of what I want. I don't want that at all. I just want to be honest with myself. I don't want to put on a show for you guys or pretend to be comfortable with something I'm not comfortable with for the sake of somebody else. I have to be able to set my own boundaries. And there are plenty of other non-binary creators who could have different opinions than me, different experiences than me, that you guys could benefit from hearing from. Definitely leave your recommendations in the comments for other non-binary creators or resources or anything like that. I'd really, look forward to looking through them and reading them. I think that can be especially helpful, especially when you're looking for validation in your experiences and knowing that you're not alone in those experiences. If you are wanting to connect with me more, outside of social media, I am opening up some public chats on my Discord. As soon as you, read through and accept all the rules, you'll be able to join and hang out in the public chats. If you want to do that, the link will be in the description. If you're one of the people that I let down with this, I'm really sorry. And I hope that you're able to still sort of make room for me and my journey while also making room for yourself and your own journey. So, let's try this again. Hi, I'm Brina, and I am non-binary. Have a great day. Special voice shout out to my top patron, Queen of Beams, my Rice Crisp Snacks, Phelan S. and Birdie, and my mod mates, Glora A., Sarah Z., and Elaine C.